The superstar illustrator who gave us this ideal of white American masculinity as tall, broad-shouldered, square-jawed, and suave was a gay German immigrant whose long-term partner was the model for many of his most iconic images. Let's talk about artist J.C. Leyendecker. Welcome back to Yesterqueers. My name's Amanda, and I'm a public historian of queer history. If you think of the golden age of American illustration, you probably think of Norman Rockwell, Charles Dana Gibson, Maxwell Parrish, or James Montgomery Flagg. But one man stood above them all for his skill, his passion, and his enduring impact on American culture. From 1903 to 1945, J.C. Leyendecker illustrated 322 covers for the Saturday Evening Post, more than any other artist. And with those covers, he created images and traditions that remain a part of American culture today, like the red-suited and red-cheeked Santa Claus and the cherubic New Year's baby, the tradition of buying flowers on Mother's Day, and the pairing of Thanksgiving and football, to name just a few. He was also a prolific commercial artist for the nascent advertising industry, shaping the way Americans understood masculinity while also filling his paintings with subversive queer imagery. Joseph Christian Leyendecker was born March 23, 1874 in Montabaur, Germany, the second of 4 children. He and his family immigrated to Chicago in 1882 when he was 8 years old because his maternal uncle owned a brewery there. An artist from the time he could hold a pencil, Joe, as he was known to his friends and family, dropped out of school at age 15 and took an apprenticeship at a Chicago engraving company, where he earned $2 a week, about $70 today, illustrating religious pamphlets and Bibles. He made his first mark on the professional art world when he was just 22 by winning first place in the Century Magazine's 1896 Midsummer Cover Contest. The posters of the cover were so popular with art lovers in Paris that they kept stealing them off of walls and newsstands, prompting a French publishing company to print posters specifically for sale to collectors for the first time ever. Sales of the poster allowed Joe and his younger brother Frank to travel to Paris to study at the Académie Julienne that fall. Now, they were both young, extremely talented, far from their family's influence, and gay, but they took very different approaches to enjoying Paris. Joe threw himself into his studies and to befriending other artists like Murat and Toulouse-Lautrec, who were also interested in creating images with the specific intent of replicating and selling them. Frank, on the other hand, threw himself into drinking absinthe, doing a variety of drugs, and befriending a group of rebellious artistic brigands. When they returned to the U.S. in 1898, Joe was clear-eyed and fired up about the future that he envisioned for himself. Frank was battling addictions that would plague him for the rest of his life. By 1900, Joe, Frank, and their sister Mary had moved to New York City. Joe and Frank opened a studio at 7 East 32nd Street, and the siblings rented a townhouse in Washington Square. Joe and Frank worked while Mary ran the household and managed her brother's lives. Well, mostly Frank's life, honestly, as his struggles with addiction meant that he often couldn't meet deadlines or complete his work. Joe and Frank each had independent magazine clients, but they worked together on corporate advertising campaigns, and Joe often had to step in to finish his brother's commissions to make sure that the work got delivered on time. The Leyendecker brothers specialized in male characters for their advertising work, which meant that a seemingly endless train of attractive Greenwich Village lads paraded through their chilly studio in the Buff, according to Joe's biographers, Lawrence and Judy Cutler. One of the models who paraded naked through their studio in 1903 was a 6'2" Adonis-like figure with massive biceps, a narrow waist, and a head of thick, dark, wavy hair. His name was Charles Beach, and Joe Leyendecker was immediately smitten. Beach was from Ontario, Canada, but he spoke with a clipped British accent after spending time abroad. He had impeccable manners and a bit of a rakish fashion sense. The Cutlers described Beach as clever but uneducated, a man who was quite beautiful but offered no intellectual challenges to Leyendecker. This was apparently not a problem for Joe, as Charles Beach quickly became not only his favorite model and his studio assistant, but also his lifelong romantic partner. Which is how a gay Canadian model in the guise of the Arrow Collar Man became an American sex symbol on the scale of Paul Newman or Elvis or Chris Evans. Introduced in 1905, Leyendecker's Arrow Collar Man not only made Cluett, Peabody & Company the most successful men's clothing company in the country by a mile, it also defined American manhood for more than a generation. In this passage in The Great Gatsby, where Daisy is telling Gatsby that he's always so cool, like the advertisement of the man, she's talking about the Arrow Collar Man. It is impossible to overstate how wildly successful and therefore how influential J.C. Leyendecker was. His images were everywhere, and by 1908, he was booked out 12 months in advance and was earning $350 per illustration. That was as much as the average worker earned in a year in 1908. Leyendecker had enormous power to shape culture. At a time when both America and the queer community were struggling to define themselves, Leyendecker generated commercial appeal among normative men while simultaneously offering a novel vision of middle-class middle-class white queer masculinity for those who might experience same-sex desire, according to scholar Dan Guadagnolo. As Blake Gopnik wrote for the New York Times in 2023, Leyendecker's images helped a nascent gay culture imagine itself folded into the American power structure. Some of Leyendecker's subversive queer imagery was more subtle, like the way this man cradles his golf clubs between his legs while focusing his attention on the other man in the picture rather than on the woman next to him. Or the way that two men in this image gaze intently at the man with the bright flower in his lapel. But some of it was not so subtle, like Leyendecker's appreciation for the male body, which he captured by oiling up his models and painting them by candlelight. Or his placement of shadows to suggest bodies, or body parts, beneath the clothes. Leyendecker's career not only survived but thrived during the First World War and the Great Depression. It wasn't until the rise of photography in the 1940s and editorial changes at the Saturday Evening Post in 1945 that Leyendecker's star started to fade. J.C. Leyendecker died of a heart attack in Charles Beach's arms in the garden of their home in New Rochelle, New York in 1951. He was 77 years old. That's it for today. As always, more information, including sources and further reading, is available in the usual place.